Well, hello everyone. This is Pastor Shane here again, and we're back with episode 20 of our Kingdom Life series through through the Sermon on the Mount in the book of Matthew. And we're finally cracking open the last chapter. It's chapter 7 of Matthew, and just like the previous two chapters of this teaching, this is going to be a strong drink. I mean, this is going to have some challenging material in it. And it's likely going to take, 6 or 7 episodes to cover everything. But I wanted to say this now so that you can be thinking ahead when we get done to kind of put a nice bookend on this series and as a final episode of it. I want to do a Q&A episode, and it can kind of act like a series finale, I guess. So let me say this now. If you have a question that you'd like to see answered on the Q&A episode, I want you to go to my website. I'm going to have a link provided below the video here. Go to my website, shaneshack.com, and click the Q&A link in the menu and submit your question. Okay, for the Q&A episode. But please keep your questions related and relevant to what we have discussed in this series in Matthew's chapter 5, 6, and 7. I don't have a date set for the Q&A episode, but I think at the pace which I've been able to release episodes here recently, you could probably look for that episode toward the end of October or early November. So that's an educated guess. All right. So today we're going to be looking at the issue of judging rightly. And so we'll be in Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 through 6. So with that said, let's read it together, okay? Verse 1, "Judge not that you be not judged. For with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the big log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye when there is a log in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Do not give to dogs what is holy, and do not throw your pearls before pigs, lest they trample them underfoot and turn to attack you." Okay, so, excuse me. Verse 1 is probably and might be the most abused and misused verse in the entire Gospel of Matthew. Judge not that you be not judged, or if you're old school, judge not lest ye be judged. It's quoted by people everywhere who get called to the carpet for their shenanigans. I mean, even Tupac Shakur took it a step further and made the famous statement, "Only God can judge me." But let's be honest, okay? People really only decry the judgment of others when that judgment, trespasses over something precious to them. You know how I know that? It's because no one ever got angry over a judgment that worked in their favor, okay? I mean, you've played Monopoly. You drew the chance card. It says bank error in your favor, $200 or whatever. You don't get mad about that. You get mad when you draw the go directly to jail card because the game has, randomly judged you worthy of going to jail. And here's the thing: you might even invite me. Let's get off Monopoly. You might invite me in the future to offer advice to you. Okay, and if I judge you in a way that affirms you, you'll be happy. But if I judge you in a way that devalues or wounds something that's precious to you, suddenly you turn into Tupac. Only God can judge me. Sadly, that's a mishandling. That's a gross mishandling of the verse because it rips it away from the other 5 verses that actually give it proper meaning. So let's see what Jesus actually means by "judge not that you be not judged." Now, this isn't some plea that Jesus is offering for everyone to be nice. Don't be nice to one another. Never judge. But instead, Jesus is actually telling us how to judge one another rightly. But you don't get that from verse 1 alone. You have to keep reading so that you get the full message. So let's keep reading. Verse 2 says, "For with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." Okay? Now, let me be emphatic. This is not a prohibition on making judgments. Okay? But that's how a lot of people read it. Again, if that's the answer that you take away, that just tells me that you stopped reading at verse 2. So this isn't if this isn't a prohibition, then what is it? Well, I mean, this may surprise you, but this is actually an admonition to be, merciful in your judgments. Look at it this way. If you're going to be judged by the same standard that you have used to judge others, do you think perhaps you might be a little more lenient, a little more compassionate, more thoughtful, more merciful, more circumspect when examining the situation? I mean, now, you might object. No one should judge anyone. Okay? Well, that's just not true. You and I judge things, people, situations every day of our lives. We make judgment calls on whether a piece of advice is good or not. We are constantly evaluating the trustworthiness of people based on the information that we have. See, if you told a secret to Johnny, but you didn't tell it to Jane, well, maybe you judged Jane to be unwise, or you judged it to be unwise to tell Jane. Maybe she's not trustworthy. Maybe it's for her protection. Who knows what variables are at work in that decision? But regardless, you made a judgment based upon those variables. See, judgment is a part of life, and everybody does it every day. Now, you might still protest, though, that I'm being too broad, okay? You're thinking of the kinds of judgments that people make against you that make you feel bad. And, well, fair enough, okay? Everyone, including me, including you, is still guilty. You have judged, and you have also been judged by other people. And it only hurts when you're on the receiving end of a poor judgment. Like we said earlier, if I judged you in a favorable way, you wouldn't be complaining. But when I judge you in a way that is unfavorable or perhaps even wrong, then it hurts. And the complaining starts. But see, this is why, this is why Jesus opens up this can of worms about judgment, because judgment is a part of life. We should do it righteously instead of self-righteously. So when we make judgments, we need to exercise mercy, compassion, and generosity in those judgments. And the next two verses tell us how to do it. And see, verses 3 and 4 takes us to this. Jesus uses this ridiculous example to make a point. See, if you're concerned about a fleck of dust in your brother's eye, but you neglect to notice that you've got a log, or maybe from our point of view, like a 2x4 hanging out of your own eye, you're out of order. Jesus tells us that first we need to remove the log from our own eyes so that we can see clearly to remove the speck of dust from our brother's eye. Now, you might think that the object lesson here is the big log, it's my own problems, but really the verses here are about having clear sight. And so what does it mean, to have clear sight? Well, first, to have clear sight means that you see your own sin clearly, okay? You recognize that you are just as much of a sinner as your brother. This puts you and this other person, brother, sister, whatever, on a level playing field. You're both broken by sin, and recognizing that you're just as broken as him or her produces humility. Humility happens to breed kindness and a gentle, uncritical spirit that is more broken about your own sin than anyone else's. And I'll be honest with you. If you go through that process of like examining, self-examination, and you discover your sin, you may find that you lose your mojo for confronting somebody over whatever you're angry about. You might find that, what you want to confront, what you want to bring to the table is nothing compared to what you deal with personally, what you deal with internally, and you let it go. I mean, that's part of being merciful. That's part of being circumspect. But secondly, it also gives you a clear view to Jesus. See, Jesus said somewhere else in the Gospels, I didn't take time to look this up, but he says, only the sick need a physician. So if you know you're broken, then you know you need a Savior. I mean, if you need a Savior, it means that you understand that you can't save yourself, much less anyone else. So if you have a clear line of sight view to Jesus, you can point your brother to him as well. So moving on to verse 5, Jesus calls anyone who doesn't do this self-examination, looking at your own sin, getting a clear sight to him, he calls you a hypocrite. To judge righteously, you must remove the log from your eye so that you'll have clear sight and so that you'll be able to see clearly to Jesus. See, failure to do this means that you're not trusting Jesus to be the Savior in this situation. What do I mean? Well, I mean, if you're judging someone from a position of your own self-righteousness, then really you're kind of trying to be the Savior in the situation yourself. See, unrighteous judging always makes us the hypocritical Savior. We feel like we have the answer, even though we are utterly powerless to do anything, but we hypocritically persist as if we can do something. See, removing the log gets clarity. When you remove the log, you get the clarity to help you remove your brother remove his speck of dust. See, we're actually supposed to make judgments, but only when we possess clear sight about our own sin and a clear line of sight to Jesus. Only then will we be merciful. See, as he has shown mercy to us, only then will we love as he has loved us. I mean, we will not, have the gentleness that Jesus has for us, until we do this, self-examination, until we take the log out of our own eye, until we get clarity. Okay, so I hope that makes sense, because now we're going to deal with verse 6. And verse 6 doesn't seem, at least at first glance, doesn't seem to fit into this discussion. It talks about dogs and pigs and pearls. Let me just reread it. I wasn't planning to reread it, but I want to reread it. It says, therefore, do not be anxious about... I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong chapter. Excuse me. Verse 6, chapter 7, verse 6. Do not give to dogs what is holy, and do not throw your pearls before pigs, lest they trample them underfoot and turn to attack you. So, dogs, pigs, pearls, holy things. What's going on here? Well, actually, it's really tied closely to righteously judging. So the keywords. Let's look at keywords. They're holy. The keywords are holy, dogs, pearls, and pigs. Let's deal with them in pairs, because holy and pearls and dogs and pigs are actually kind of analogs to each other. They're metaphors that refer to the same things. So let's do dogs and pigs first, okay? Pigs are unclean animals. You go to Leviticus chapter 11, verse 7, tells us that pigs are unclean. Now, dogs don't actually show up in any of the unclean animal lists, but they're considered practically unclean because they're scavengers. They will eat dead flesh. They touch dead bodies. And in the law, if you touch something that's dead, you become ceremonially unclean. So therefore, dogs are perpetually unclean animals just because they scavenge, they eat dead things, or at least they're willing to eat dead things. Now we're talking about dogs in the in the days of Jesus. Okay, I mean, I know you don't feed dead animals to your dogs per se. But you give them, you give them puppy chow or whatever. Well, they didn't have puppy chow. Okay, dogs were kind of fed either scraps from the table, or they were on their own to go out and kill their own meal, or to find something that was already dead and eat it. So because of that, they're practically unclean. So the Jews didn't like dogs. In fact, you can see it across the Bible that dogs are often referred to in a negative light. I mean, just keeping it in the New Testament for brevity, Paul in Philippians 3:2 says, he warns us to look out for dogs. He's talking about people, right? But he's comparing wicked men to dogs, unclean dogs, practically unclean. And here Jesus tells us that dogs do not deserve what is holy. Now, more transparently, holiness and pearls represents godly things, spiritual treasures. So putting all this back together, the parable in this verse, I mean, you could say that this verse represents a small parable. Does this. Dogs and pigs represent the lost, the people who are outside of God's covenant. And holiness and pearls represent the righteous judgments that Jesus has just taught us how to make. So the parable here is that we shouldn't judge those outside of the community of faith. Why? Because they'll trample those judgments underfoot. They won't appreciate them. They won't understand them. In fact, it says that if you do this, if you throw these pearls, if you give what's holy before swine, if you give these holy things to the dogs, not only will they trample those things underfoot, they won't appreciate them, in other words, but they will also turn and attack you. They won't understand. They'll clap back at you, basically, and cause you all kinds of grief and trouble. So we're not, but they just won't see the value of the help that you're offering. Why? Because this is a spiritual issue. Spiritual issues are discerned by and understood by spiritual people. And this jives completely with what Paul teaches in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 12 and 13. It says, for what have I to do... Let me get it. Okay, there it is. For what have I to do with judging outsiders? It is not those inside the church... is it not those inside the church whom you are to judge? God judges those outside. So purge the evil person from among you. Now, the background of that is there's a guy in the church that's, basically sleeping with his stepmom, and the church isn't doing anything about it. And Paul earlier says, I'm not even there, and I've already judged this guy. What are you doing? Get him out of there. So the whole thing of not judging people outside of the covenant, not judging the lost, Paul backs that up. And so judging the lost is not our job. God will judge them. But we are to absolutely engage in righteous judgments within the family of God. Okay? Kingdom people, hear this. Kingdom people hold each other accountable by lovingly, humbly, and gently making righteous judgments. Now, I know that's a tough pill for many to swallow, but it is crystal clear in the Bible that this is what Jesus has told us to do. This is part of kingdom life, making righteous judgments within the family of God. Okay, that's all for now. So next time we're going to deal with the famous asking it will be given to you verses, which I believe are verses 7 through 11 of Matthew chapter 7, and how we can understand those verses without falling into what prosperity error. Okay, so as always, I hope this has been helpful. Now don't forget, below the video here, there's a link to my website where you can send in your questions for the Q&A episode. that's coming up soon. Like I said at the start, please keep the questions limited to what we've covered in Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7. So thanks for watching. Grace and peace. Until next time.